Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. I'm kind of so excited about this one. I've had to try to record this opener about 15 times. Hugh Miller, the editor for a long time of Cross Country Magazine, now does a lot of their testing. Amazing British pilot. This show is going to knock your socks off. Before we get into that, though, as always, a few little things of housekeeping. I've been working with my editor, Miles Connolly, on this, on these last few shows. I hope you've seen the radical upgrade in quality. And I just wanted to really just thank all of you for donating to the show. When I took this on a couple years ago, we're now at episode 33. I just kind of took it on as a lark, and it's actually become a real undertaking. It takes an amazing amount of time to do this, which I love and Miles loves. We're learning so much. I hope you're learning so much. But it does take a lot of time, and I really just appreciate your donations. Those of you who have given some money to the show, thank you. As always, all we ask for is $1 a show, and excitingly, we've got a new thing up right now on Patreon. You can find that link on the cloudbasedmayhem.com. So rather than going through PayPal and doing a donation every once in a while, kind of whenever it hits you, you can now support us on Patreon, where it's basically every episode. You cap it, you decide how much. Like always, all we ask for is $1 a show, but if you want to give more, you can do so, and for that, there are all kinds of rewards. So check that out. Go to cloudbasedmayhem.com. Check out that Patreon link. And as a little bonus, I've got about 3 minutes of clips from North of Known that very, very few people have seen. Only those folks that were up in Banff, actually. Some fantastic footage there with me talking about what Patreon is all about. So if you've been dying to see a little bit of North of Known, you can go there to check it out. And one thing that Miles just reminded me of that I wanted to remind you of is that what, to me, I think is so cool about this podcast, about kind of dispersing all this knowledge, is the access to really the best people in the world. You can't do this. There's no such thing as a surfing podcast where they're talking to Kelly Slater, or at least not that I know of. But in our sport, it's so small and such an incredible community that, the best of the best, when I go down through the list, some of the people we've had on the show, Will Gadd and Aaron Duragatti and Josh Cohn and Nick Grease and Nate Scales and just, my mentors. Just so many good talks there that is been compiled from literally lifetimes and lifetimes of flying. So, and enjoy that. But also, if you can't, contribute to the show, totally understand. It's free for a reason. And that's because I want to spread this knowledge. And so do all these guests. We want to get it out there. We want to get people psyched about learning and getting better and being safer and making smart decisions. That's what this is all about. So I think there are still thousands and thousands and thousands of people that don't know about the show. So the next time you're on launch, if you've gotten something out of one of these, tell your friends, post it on Facebook, share it, share the love. And that's another way that we get it out there. You can also just give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or TuneIn, however you get the podcast. Those ratings, you'd be surprised, they go a long way into supporting us. So don't feel bad if you can't give us money, totally understood, but just share it. Hugh Miller, this podcast, when I was doing it, I have to say that I was so kind of focused on asking the right questions. I wasn't listening as well. And when I went back through and listened to it again for the second, third, fourth time, working with Miles, this is seriously incredible. He has so many good things to say. His kind of background and expertise is about psychology. So we talk about just like psychology of flying, and then, flatland tactics and league and X contest and the importance of preparation. And, one of the most valuable things is learning when not to fly. And there is just, I've got lists, 3 pages of lists here of some of the things that Hugh talks about, when to move up on wings and the difference between 2-liners and 3-liners. And there's just, I promise you're going to be blown away with this one. Sit back, relax, Enjoy, listen, and then listen again and share it with your friends. I think you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, please enjoy this incredible conversation with one of the legends in our sport, one of the guys who has really driven forward progress in this sport and has been such an icon for us all and a mentor. Please enjoy this talk with Hugh Miller.
I was out of your league, and you were 20,000 underneath.
Hugh Miller, it's awesome to have you on the show. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I'm looking at your little Skype picture here. You're sending it out over these beautiful UK green flatlands. That is not the kind of territory we have around my house, especially not right now. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for sharing some stories and knowledge with us.
Pleasure. And I often joke with my friend Jim. We listen to your podcast, and you talk about sending it and carving epic lines and all. So I'm going to try and we often joke about that in our flying in the UK. You know, we sent it at half a meter climb out of a hill, and we went on this epic backcountry adventure on a new line. We're at least 3 miles from the nearest pub, all the way through it. So yeah, our style of flying in the UK is a little bit different from yours, Gavin. I'm sure to underwhelm over the course of the next hour, but yeah, bear with me.
No, I don't think so at all. And in fact, just this morning, I got a little Facebook message from somebody on there. I apologize for forgetting the name, but inviting me over for the North-South Cup, which is something I would love to partake in. You guys always talk so fondly of that, and I just think it'd be terrific. I have to admit, I'm not much of a flatlands pilot. I've done some in Chelan and down in Australia a couple of years ago when I was training for the X-Alps, which is strange to be training in the flatlands for the X-Alps, but I wanted some hours. We don't fly around here much in the winter, so yeah, I'd be quite keen on that. Maybe bring the Alaska movie over with me and show it to some of you folks. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
I think you have a similar thing, don't you? You'll get together and try and fly wherever's good in the Western states over a 2 or 3 week period. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. The Intermountain Wide Open is what Nate calls it. Nate organized it. In fact, he used to run kind of a league event here way back in the day, much before I became a pilot. He got that together. I think this was our second one this year. And it's been really terrific. It's right after the X-Alps, or it was last year anyway. And we just kind of have a 2.5 week, 3 week period where you kind of pick your days and organize your own retrieve. But it's a really good way to get, that's the problem we have around here is we just don't get that many people. And it's a long drive and it's a long way from other launches. And so it kind of collects the whole Northwest crew, and it's a good time.
Well, you'll probably have done just enough training for the North-South Cup then. If you cut the hills down by about 10%, throw in a few more grey skies, replace beer with tea, swap the grizzly bears for sheep, and you'll be okay. I think you'll manage.
I'll do it all except the tea.
We'll look after you.
All right, excellent. Thanks. Well, I like beer. Hey, Hugh, for those who are very familiar with the magazine, I think, they know a lot about your history, but those who maybe aren't, or those who haven't been around very long, like me, can you share with us a little bit of your history and your clear passion for the sport? I was just doing some research on you before we got on here, and you were back in the British Championships and the World Air Games back in '98, which I don't even know what that is. So let's take us back a little while and catch me up to speed.
I started flying when I was 15, and it was the cheapest way of flying, really. So I got into it just because it was £20-30 a day to train back then, in 1992. And I started flying with my dad at an airfield in Essex, which is the sort of flatlands northeast of London. And we were getting towed up on basically parachutes behind Land Rovers with really thick ropes, and then you release from the Land Rover 800 feet and then get taught how to do a full stall and spin without a reserve and land. I think this is a bit exciting. So that's how I started. I started competing in 94, 95-ish, I think. And those were sort of, the mid-90s were a really fantastic time to be into competitions because a lot of pilots were quite well sponsored. I got onto the Nova team, so yeah, when I was like 20, I remember like I was at Sheffield University, and I got paid to fly to Australia and do a World Cup. And if you did well, you got prize money as well. I mean, it's just amazing to think back on it. You know, you didn't just get free wings, you got really well looked after. So yeah, I competed for 3 or 4 years, and then basically saw lots of friends fall out of the sky and thought, not sure about this. And I ended up getting a job with cross country. And so I could sort of afford to fund my flying through working for the magazine, and so backed away from the competitions a bit. And that was 99. And then since then, really, I've been into XC flying here in the UK and a little bit abroad. But yeah, still really passionate about XC flying and trying to, you know, go a long way and enjoy each day. Yeah, so I guess that's where I am. And I still review wings for the magazine occasionally. Really enjoy that. I've reviewed the King and the Ion 4 most recently, so I try and stay current on. I try and sort of concentrate on the Ds and the high end Cs. It's quite a hard job to keep across all the different sectors of wings, and yeah, get involved with writing for the magazine when I can too.
It was your background when you took over the magazine back in the 90s. Did you have a background in editing and that kind of thing, or was it just something you fell into?
I basically got swooped on by Sherry Tevenot, who was the editor. I was doing journalism at college, and I'd literally just put the pen down on my last essay at college, and Sherry Tevenot rang me up and went, "Oi, get out to France." And she sort of suckered me in, and I was working for her. Then she quickly made me the editor, and I was 21 at the time. And then her personal life was kind of slightly in crisis. Her marriage was breaking down, and she thought, okay, that's it, I'm putting the plug on the magazine. And I was like, wait, I'm just taking me on. I'm editing this magazine, and it's, you know, it's in this tiny, you know, it's in this world where, you know, I really, you know, like everyone in this world, and it's quite a big deal to me to be editing this magazine, and you want to pull the plug out. That's not going to look good for me. So I sort of I rang a friend, Steve Senior, and who had much more business sense than me, and he got involved and helped me keep it going independently. But that was, yeah, and I said, yeah, I'll run it for 2 or 3 years, and that was 20 years ago, and I'm still involved.
Tell me about competitions. You wrote in your email you won the league last year, the UK league. Are you also still doing PWCs? Are you doing it still international comps, or is it more?
No,
okay.
No, not at all. No, we do the North South Cup because that's kind of, it's a way of getting friends together who you don't often see through the year, and having a non-competition. So it really doesn't matter what place you come, because you're flying for your team. And actually, we try and make the scoring slightly ridiculous if we possibly can. So, you know, Guy overflew the goal field last year, and he got extra points for getting lost and missing it. And, you know, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of pilots do competitions for a few years and then stop. I mean, there are a few who continue and, you know, really committed to it. But I think your exposure to risk is pretty high if you're flying at top level competition. And there's a sort of fairly natural attrition rate from that, not necessarily just from, you know, injury, but just the risk to rewards, you know, ratio, and rationalizing that.
For pilots who are, you know, looking to really improve in maybe a shorter rather than a career type of time span, you know, one of the things I hear from other pilots all the time is, oh, do competitions. But are there other ways? Are there things that you would tell say a 500-hour pilot, hey, here's what you need to do for the next year or two to really improve your skills, you know, to go from a 2-hour flight to an 8-hour flight?
No, I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think, you know, flying competitions definitely can rapidly improve your flying. But yeah, there are, you know, it's not for everyone. There's a really talented local pilot, Vincent Talot, who's just disappeared back to France actually. But he, you know, we thought, yeah, he's going to be he is a fantastic pilot. He's good XC pilot, thinks for himself. Went to competition, wasn't for him. You know, they're just not for everyone. I think getting in with every club's got keen local XC pilots, and getting in with them and going flying with them is definitely, and just being, you know, soaking up information and being like a sponge, absorbing as much as you can. You know, that's how you learn in a competition. There's no reason you can't do that outside of competitions. Yeah, so I just be a sponge if you can.
What wing do you fly, and why?
I flew the 777 King last year. I flew it to review it and was really impressed. And they kindly lent it to me for 3 or 4 months after the sort of review period had ended. I mean, in England, flatlands, you can fly a slightly higher aspect ratio wing with more comfort than you can in the mountains, obviously. Yeah, I enjoy the sort of the extra sniffiness that higher aspect ratio wings can give you flying in lighter lift. And, in the last 3-4 years, the leading edges have become so much more solid. It's just transformed the way you can fly in windier conditions, going crosswind and, pushing upwind.
Is that 777? I'm not familiar with that wing. Is that a two-liner?
Yeah. It's a 3-liner, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 3-liner. I've got a Zeno as well, which I'm going to fly in Colombia in a couple of weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. I've sort of gone between 2 and 3-liners. I had an R12 and flew that, and then I borrowed a friend's R11 quite a lot a year ago. But I guess just for me, trying to be in the air for sort of 5, 6, 7 hours and wanting to feel relaxed throughout the whole flight, 3-liners just give that bit more comfort factor. So. Yeah.
Talk about one of the questions I get a lot of is, when should I step up? When should I step up to the next wing? And I think there's misconceptions about 2-liners. For me, myself, I feel quite a bit more connected to the wing on a 2-liner because my hands are always on the Bs or on the Badger bars. And is that I haven't flown a 3-liner actually in a long time, so I can't say, but talk about when a pilot should move up, and because you're bouncing back and forth, maybe say between the Zeno and the 777, between a 2-liner and a 3-liner, talk about the pluses and minuses.
I think, you're right. It's that connection to the wing you get with a 2-liner, and if you've got the aptitude to read the wing and react to it, and be in tune with it, then 2-liner is a good option. But you've also obviously got the 2-liners only really work at higher aspects, so you don't get low aspect 2-liners, and with the height you can't cheat high aspect. When high aspect goes wrong, then they're harder to handle. So that's another consideration. It's not just about the 2 versus 3-liners.
Sure.
I think lots of people go on about this. Pilots move up to wings too quickly. I think if you're looking to move up a class of wing, you've got to think, well, what's holding me back? Is it really the wing, or is it something I'm doing? Am I landing after 3 or 4 hours? Can I stay in the air for 6 or 7 hours? Because if you want to fly a long way, you need to be able to stay in the air for 6 or 7 hours. If you're not doing that, then there's really no reason to move up beyond a high NB or a low C. I wouldn't have thought, because perversely, if you move up, then you are inhibiting your ability to stay in the air because you're going to be that much more burnt out by the you've only got so much bandwidth in your brain to deal with what's around you and your wing and everything else. And if too much of that is being used up in flying your wing, you're not going to have the bandwidth to spot the bird that's climbing to your left, or see the cloud developing off to your right. So I think it's a case of letting the wing do some of the work for you as you progress and get to know the sky and get used to different conditions. It's a huge apprenticeship for learning to fly, and I don't think you can rush it.
I think that's really sound advice. Something that I've probably talked about ad nauseum, and I apologize to our listeners if you've already heard this story, but I've made the argument many times. When I had my big flight here, what was that, 3 years ago from Baldy, it was a huge day, a lot of wind, dealing with some really, it was a massive day where I was fighting to stay under 18,000 quite a few times and getting chased by big weather. The day before, had actually been my personal best, and gotten home at almost 4 o'clock in the morning and only had a couple hours sleep. And it was just, going home to go to bed. And my buddy Matt Beechner was, called me, "Oh, it's even better today. You got to come back up to launch." So I raced back up, and as you can imagine, I was exhausted, and I was on the peak 3. Whereas typically back then I would have been flying the Ice Peak 6. A lot of this because I was flying downwind that day and there was a lot of wind. But I've made the argument many times that I wouldn't have had that flight had I been on my Ice Peak. I think because I would have been dealing the Ice Peak's just a lovely, lovely glider, and it doesn't blow up. But just having that extra bit of because I was tired and because I was probably a fraction of a second behind things because of the exhaustion, which I typically tend for some reason I tend to fly better when I'm really tired. But I think that really helped that day. Just being on a glider that I didn't have to manage as much allowed me to go longer, I believe, than I would have had I been on a two liner. So I think a lot of times it's the wing that fits the day as well, isn't it?
Sure, sure. No, definitely. And I had a lovely flight. Just from our local site to the end of Kent. It's as far as you can fly really along the south coast of England. It's about 120k. So I did that on the Ion 4 in April, and that's a beginner wing. It's a school wing, and you can still if I was 10 minutes behind Mark Watts on his Enzo 2, he was flying it nice and slowly for me, but it just showed me actually that all wings these days are pretty good, and so why not fly something where you give yourself a bit of thinking space. Yeah, I'm quite sort of interested in psychological aspects of flying, just because my day job is in mental health and working with kids and families, and so I'm quite interested in the crossover about how we make our decisions and the way we develop hunches for what's going to work in flying, and how that can then help us. There's this thing called the Iowa Gambling Task. It was at Iowa University, and they're interested in the way our bodies can give us hunches and how we can make decisions unconsciously. And so I think if you're flying a safe wing, it can help you with that aspect too. You can start to fly a little bit more intuitively if you're not racked with fear. Do you see what I mean?
Sure.
If you're racked with fear, when you're racked with fear, if your amygdala is really firing, then your brain's it's going to be very hard to think. And let alone use your sort of unconscious decision making.
I like that when I talked to Kelly Farina in a previous episode, we talked a lot about his book, and he was a huge proponent for that your brain can only handle so much, and if you're thinking about collapses and catching stuff and fear, then it's kind of like tunnel vision, isn't it? Your brain just narrows down, and you start losing all the peripheral stuff that really helps us fly big distance.
Yeah, absolutely. And did I mention the Iowa Gambling Task? Basically, they got people to draw from 4 cards on a computer, and each time you'd lose or you'd win some money, depending on which card you drew. And it took people up to sort of 30 or 40 goes to start consciously choosing the right cards that got them got them the most money. But they were also hooked up, and their sweat glands were being monitored. And every time they went towards a bad card, then their stress response would be triggered. And that was happening after just 10 goes. So their body was registering which cards were the right cards to go for long before their conscious brains could work that out. So that sort of tells you something about how important hunches are. I do a lot of flying with Mark Watts, and when we get low, I just sit back and just watch where he goes, because he's got this amazing capacity to fly to the right area and get up. And he won't know why he's doing it. But he's been flying for 25 years in the flatlands in England. And something about the picture and the way the town's sitting and the river and the hill, it's not a conscious decision. It just feels right, and he goes to it and it works.
I love it.
It's a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit weird.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'd love to transition to flatlands, because it's one of the questions we get a lot of that I can't answer very well. I'm not a flatlands guy. Distill some knowledge there.
I think the most important thing with the flatlands is obviously you can't, it's much harder to visualize what the air's doing, because you haven't got the obvious, slopes and cliffs, and you can see where the sun is, see what the valley winds are doing. It's harder to build a picture. Although for flatland pilots like me going to the mountains, I feel pretty lost because I do it so irregularly now. So I think the really important thing in flatlands is to start building your picture of what the day is like the moment you wake up. So you're seeing, what's happening with the clouds and the sky when the first cues start to appear, when you're driving to the hill, when you see your first birds climbing, looking at how fast they're going up, looking at what's happening to the drift, getting on the hill nice and early, and taking off as soon as you can, so you can start getting a feel for the air. And then as the day heats up, generally, the air the thermals will puncture through the inversion layers as the day heats up. So you can, if you're in the air, you can get a feel for where they are, and later in the day they may re-establish, so you'll know what sort of heights that you might get stuck at. Clouds as well. If you're looking at clouds, then I think it's as important to look at the clouds and see where the signs of activity are, as just to see a cloud and think that looks good, because especially early in the day, clouds can appear and disappear before you can get to them. If you imagine you're gliding towards a cloud, you're traveling at the speed of someone on a racing bike. You're doing 30, 35 k's an hour, 40 k's an hour. You're going to have to pedal very quickly to get them before they die. Later in the day, sort of 1, 2, 3 o'clock onwards, they're more established, and they're a surer bet. So it's just about building a picture of the day, and also I think treating the sky a bit like a checkerboard. A lot of pilots early on, me as well. I used to think, okay, head for that factory, that's going to work. But actually, if you think about the sky and the land divided into like a chessboard or a checkerboard, some squares, the white squares, there's a much better chance of lift. The black squares, which are shaded out or just not in cycle, pretty much guaranteed there won't be lift there. So it's a case of always arriving in the right kind of area and then zeroing in on where the thermal might be. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
If you're getting into the right kind of square, then it's not working, maybe going left or right a bit, as opposed to ploughing on downwind. That can tend to work, rather than just gliding straight downwind. Get into the right area and then sniff about and look about a bit more.
Talk to me about flying lines in the flatlands. Like one of the things that I've often come up against is you're on this terrific line that's leading you right into a blue hole, and I'm often tempted to just, it's this line, it's just that part hasn't. I'm in cycle, that should work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Is this just a hunch thing, or do you just avoid those? Do you have any kind of rules for entering and exiting clouds?
Quite often, you'll get a good line, won't you? You'll be charging along for 20, 30 k's, and then you'll get to the end of it like, oh, now what? Because it's just this massive blue hole that beyond you, and you've sort of been geared for speed and you've been blasting along, and then you have to stop and think, and you can't just leap into the blue. Quite often, it is worth going off at 30 degrees, 40 degrees, one way or the other, and I mean, here in England, we're always avoiding airspace, so that can usually help you rather than hinder you. It's quite rare to fly straight downwind. It's sort of late, mid-afternoon onwards, it's definitely worth following the lines of clouds. Earlier in the day probably as well, but as I say, because they kind of build and dissipate much quicker, they're less reliable. So yeah, I definitely try and follow the lines of activity as much as you can. Don't pile on into a blue hole.
Do you guys often get blue days in the UK, or is there enough moisture around always that you're getting clouds?
Yeah, no, we do. We get days when it blues out, or it starts blue for quite a while until the lapse rate's good enough for it to pop. I quite enjoy blue days. The World Air Games in Turkey was mainly blue 20 years ago, whenever it was. But flying, inverted days when it's a bit choppy, and it's what Kelly calls sticky days, isn't it? The thermals are sort of gloopy, and you really have to kind of hang on to them and try and feel where they are. I quite enjoy that kind of flying. Yeah, it's good fun.
You mentioned you're heading to Colombia, which has a lot of flatlands. Is this have you been down to Colombia a lot? Do you often take
never.
winter? Never. You're kidding.
Never. No. Because of my job, I work term time, so it's quite hard to get away in the winters. But first time this time. Have you been?
Oh yeah. My first time was the super final there a couple years ago, and actually Russ did really well there that year. And it's terrific. You're gonna love it. It's just you get an insane amount of hours. You fly every day. It's really pretty terrific, and it's got this nice combination of mountain and flatlands. And looking at your picture in the UK, it'll be very familiar to you. You know, there's huge sugarcane fields. I'm sure you've heard about the fires, and Chrigel flying into the fire at the super final and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, it's a great place. You'll love it. You'll get a lot of hours and come back with a smile and a sunburn.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. Hugh, tell me about, let's switch gears here a little bit because you've been involved in the sport and probably been around a lot of the statistics and stuff with the magazine. What do you see happening with flying in terms of numbers? And then since this, and since this kind of shark nose technology and since things changed so radically in 2009, Russ had a really good observation about safety and why paragliding has remained dangerous, even as wings have gotten so much safer and better. He was talking about that, back in the 90s, you just wouldn't fly in the winds that we do now because the wings are so much faster. So that's automatically making it, that makes the lee more dangerous and the places we go more dangerous. And it's just paragliding. It's dangerous. But I realized I've asked you quite a number of questions there, but I'd love to get your take on kind of what you see in the industry.
I think you're right. I mean, technology is playing a much bigger part now than ever before because the wings are so much better. I think it's quite difficult to make a really good wing now because, like Russ said, progress has necessarily slowed down. They're trying to build a new wing. It is like reinventing the wheel now. It's getting quite hard, I think, and yet the progress keeps going. So hats off to the really good manufacturers. And that's great for us, we're very lucky, I think, to be flying now. I took out my old comp wing, the Nova Nexon, last year, and it was just incredible looking at the progress between that and an ENA wing like this, the Swing Discus. So yeah, it used to be a sort of cottage industry, really. 40 or 50 manufacturers, in alpine villages knocking out pretty okay wings, and now it's sort of got more concentrated, with probably fewer really good brands. In terms of the growth of the sport, I think it's fairly. I mean, it seems to be fairly static in the UK. I think France might have shrunk a little bit. I think Germany's fairly static. Is it something like 120,000 pilots worldwide still? Yeah, it seems to be becoming a slightly older sport. We're still flying, but there aren't a huge number of younger pilots coming through. So it'd be nice for that to change. Having said that, in the UK, there's quite a few sons of pilots who've started flying, like Theo Warden, and Laurie Nocta. So they're getting into it and making the sport a little less decrepit, I suppose, lowering the average age to about 42. So,
darn it, I'm just over the average.
What can we do about that? It's great that you guys are coming in from other sports, climbing and kite surfing and sports like that. But yeah, we do need to look at making the sport accessible to guys in their teenagers and guys in university, because it's an amazing thing to do, isn't it?
Tell me about your love of it. I mean, is it if you had any lulls in your passion for the sport over the years, or is it something that's kind of gripped you from the beginning and grip it and rip it the whole way through?
Last year was a lull when I realised that half, probably not half the pilots voted Brexit or Trump, but that put me off the sport a bit. I realised that not everyone was a sort of peace-loving forward thinker, but there you go.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, I think I'm lucky because when I worked exclusively for the magazine, that might have dulled my passion a little, just because you're working in the industry. But now my day job's absolutely nothing to do with flying. Flying is a real release, escape for me, and I appreciate it as much now as ever, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a constant, really. Flying with my little boy George, who's now 11, but flying cross country with him's pretty amazing. Flying with friends, flying with Mark Watts, I fly a lot with in the UK, and flying at the North South Cup, and it's fun having Russ come over to the North South Cup because we sort of always talk about the UK and how good it can be, and they just laugh at us. He calls paragliding in the UK indoor paragliding because it's so tame. And And then he's on a bus. We've chartered a coach, 52-seat coach, at 7 a.m, and we're piling all these pilots on. It's like a World Cup task, and we're driving up to Scotland and abandoning everyone, train spotting style, in this car park in the middle of nowhere. That scene in Train Spotting where they get out and they look at the scenery and they're like, "What do we do now?" He's like, and he's blowing a hoolie. And we say, "Yeah, let's take off you go." It's like, this has got disaster written all over it. And then 7 hours later, we were all scattered all over, the English dales, and getting taxis from everywhere back to base. And those sorts of adventures are just.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, it would be remiss of me. We kind of glossed over something there a while back, and I need to return to it. Your expertise, where you work now at the NIH, what is it?
Sorry?
Where you work now at the NIH, is that it?
Oh, the NHS.
NHS, okay.
National Health Service. You don't have one of those in America.
No. We
don't have one here for long either.
Yeah, we leave people in the gutter, Hugh. We don't like to take. Yeah, no, only.
We drag them halfway out and then we kick them back in.
Yeah, only the rich survive, right? Yeah, Jesus. Good God, we can't go down that road. But I do want to go down the road of psychology with you. We kind of glossed over it before, and that was wrong with me. I want to get back to that. With your kind of background and working with kids and psychology and mental health.
It's very simple. Paragliding, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that comes up, of course, again and again is, accidents and fear and getting over it and moving on or just leaving it behind. Talk a little bit about that. And you even said in the email to me that you've worked with some people in terms of like, how do you maintain happiness with flying and should you even try? And, how do you talk people kind of off the edge? Or, I think we've all had friends that have gotten hurt who are flying scared. And of course, with 2020 hindsight, we go, God, I wish I would have X, I wish I would have said something, or I wish they wouldn't have been flying, or, again, I'm asking you too many questions at once, but.
Well, okay, so I'm not a sports psychologist, but I've chatted to 3 or 4 British pilots in competition to try and help them become more aware of the way sometimes they can have thinking traps that kind of get in the way of them doing well. A very common one in competition is when you're doing well, you want to push on and kind of show, this is, I'm doing it here, and then you end up alone and out front and bombing out, and it does your end result no good at all. So I've worked with a few pilots around identifying when that gremlin comes up, what it looks like, what it feels like, what the thought is. It's sort of basic CBT, what the thought is, what the feeling is, what happens in your body, and then what you want to do. And then trying to break the cycle, because it can be quite compulsive. I mean, one pilot said that he was renowned for always flying brilliantly well, and he was a British champion that had never been British champion, and he got fed up with it after 15 years, and he said, look, I just want to work out what's going on here. And we identified that he didn't want to fly like a dick, but he also wanted to be British champion. And actually sometimes you need to fly like a dick and hold yourself back and let other people do the mistake in order to be British champion. So it was a case of kind of just working out that was one of his drivers, that was as important to him as being British champion, but actually it was getting in the way of him becoming posting a really, really successful result. In terms of safety, I don't know. I before we chatted, I actually Googled fear and psychology just to see what people were talking about, and it's quite a sad thing actually, because a guy posted on Paragliding Forum about 8 years ago that he'd seen a bad accident and was quite scared and was asking for advice on how to get over it. And during that sort of forum chat, part of it was that, he said he feels very isolated from his wing, and he feels like he's got nothing to do when he's flying at trim. And then I sort of kept reading people's advice and stuff, scrolled down, and then it turns out this guy dies 3 weeks later, having suffered a big collapse.
Oh my God.
And that sent the shivers up my spine, because I thought, and I don't think a few pilots have said, go on an SIV course, learn about your wing. Actually, the fear he was feeling at trim in rough air was the correct response. He needed to be more on his flying and flying actively and controlling the pitch of his wing. And perhaps if he'd been doing that, then that would have helped him on that day. So fear isn't a bad. What I'm saying is fear isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing, and we need, quite often we need to listen to it more rather than less.
Yeah, no, however, it's the thing that keeps us alive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, however, often fear about irrational things it can be debilitating. And knowing how we react to fear, whether we, is it fight, flight, or freeze? Those are the ways which all mammals are programmed. If we're freezing, then we need to be looking at that and working out what we're going to do. Because if we know that our habit is to react in the wrong way, then we probably need to address that.
I was just working on my column for you guys yesterday, and I was working off one of the things that Russ was talking about with Chrigel. So let's switch gears here, although it's very related. You've covered the X-Alps, I believe, since the beginning, or 2005, and so you've. And by covering it, I saw you and Ed do it last year in 2015. You're just racing around the Alps and kind of watching it all go down.
You guys have got it tough.
Oh no, you guys have it tough. I tell you, it really.
My fingers. By the end of those 2 weeks, honestly, they're in tatters.
No, but honestly, when I saw Ed at the end of that race, he was ragged out. I think he looked as bad as I did. I mean, but he also had this look on his face. We got back together at Fuchsil MC, after the party in Monaco, which I didn't actually make because I'd screwed up on our reservation of the RV and had to get it back to Germany. But he had this look on his face of real concern. And I guess it was just like this, thank God you're alive. But at the same time, I don't know. It was like Ed, just classic big bear hug that made me feel really good. And I was, of course, on this incredible high and had forgotten how dangerous it all was. But you've covered the X-Alps, and I've had quite a few X-Alps pilots on the show. But I'd love to get your perspective on what separates the top 5, the top 10 from the rest of the field. I thought Russ's comment about, that your basic or high end intermediate pilot knows just as much in terms of paragliding and what makes it work and flying big lines as Chrigel does. He just executes everything better. So I'd love to get your perspective on, because you've covered it so long and you've seen that really change from, what was an adventure race where guys were carrying their pots and pans and you'd wait for 5K for your buddy to catch up and, take your time. I mean, talking to Will Gadd about it, who was in the first one, who just begged me not to do it. It was a very different race back then.
Yeah, the top 5 aren't carrying their pots and pans.
There we go. We can move on.
That's where you're going wrong.
Damn it! I knew there was something.
Well, they're Swiss, aren't they? They're Swiss or they're Austrian.
Yeah.
It's their
they're
backyard.
Swiss. They're Swiss.
I mean,
period.
I don't think you can beat yourself up too much. I mean, they're they know the terrain. Even before his first X-Alps, Chrigel had gone and done the X-Alps at a leisurely pace, to get the lay of the land and to work out what worked and what didn't. Yeah, and I mean, he's super prepared, isn't he? And he just, I don't know. I sort of agree with Russ because it doesn't let us off the hook, does it? We all know as much as Chrigel, we all fly as well as him. However, when he's taking off in sort of 30k an hour southerly wind and he's flying 50k south into Italy, into that wind, and then he describes the way he does it as being like a kind of salmon darting upstream, kind of, hiding behind the rocks, and then, you just think, okay, he's doing a different sport from the rest of us. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to the race, isn't there? It's so multifaceted. There's so much going on, not just in the flying and the tactics, where you land, all the rest of it. And his sort of cat-like ability to hop from one peak to another, and then just extend the day by 20-30 Ks over whoever's second is pretty phenomenal. Yeah, but just I know, I know from Ed's perspective as well. It's there's a big buzz around the event, and there's a big buzz in the organisation as well. There's 50 or 60 people chasing after you all and watching it all and reporting on it, and there's just stories upon stories that are happening, and there is a sort of level of concern as to what that pressure and that buzz does to you guys who are competing, because it does become your whole world, doesn't it? For
totally.
8-9 days, and yeah, I mean, you had a pretty glazed look on your face when I saw you hiking after the first day, going, "I'm the happiest man in the world. I'm the happiest." I was like, "Oh, all right, okay, Gavin, carry on." But yeah, it's a pretty intense experience, and with Captain Sensible's hat on, this is aviation. It's not sport. Should you be chucking the two together and really making it an adventure race? This is flying. Checklists and all the rest of it, and all. I don't want to go too far down that road. It's the other side of me thinks it's great to have a race that's so free, where it's all down. The personal responsibility is on the pilot's shoulders, and perhaps one reason why people haven't been seriously hurt so far is because of that level of responsibility. It's not like a comp where you've got 100 pilots flying into a stupid area. You have to assess every decision you make yourself, and take it or not.
Will you be following it again this year? Will you be reporting on it? No, that's it. Shoot! Oh no! Who's going to look at my glazed face?
Well, I basically every time I was asked a sort of expert comment as the whatever of cross country, I just ring Tom Payne and go, "Tom, what do you reckon?" Because he knew the answers and I didn't. So the truth is, there are others that do a much better job than me. So I think Tom's going to be involved. I think Ed will be involved. No, it's hard for me to get away with the day job, and I haven't been asked. But apart from that, I'll be there in a shot.
Well, I don't know that I would guess that you haven't been asked, because it seems that since the tragedy with Hannes, it doesn't seem like they're as on the ball as they typically are. I don't know how involved he was, but it seems like things are, we didn't find out who was actually in it until 2 months later than we did in 2015. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all shapes up.
Quite a different field this year as well. I was quite surprised that I was just looking. Stefan Huber's not in it, and there's quite a few new faces. But yeah, quite different though.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty thick lineup. There's some pretty good names in there. I think it's going to be faster yet again. I just got off the phone a couple weeks ago with Hansa, who did it. Was it 5 times or at least 4? But he's not doing it this year, and he was just talking about just how fast it's getting. The teams are just so much more professional, and it's all it moves quick.
Yeah. I remember he used to always fly with a picture of his son on his flight deck, didn't he? Just to keep him a little bit grounded, and he realised that there could be that tendency to take risks that were probably not suitable. I remember John Chambers gave some really good advice. Just basically fly the race that you would respect, and don't take undue risk. Give clouds a wide berth and all the rest of it. And yeah. Good luck.
I think that. Well, thank you. I was surprised how much fun it was. We laughed our way all the way across the Alps. It was so much fun, and I think you have to. At least for us, that was really important for us. That like, hey, this would not be fun if you made a decision that ended in injury or death, which is very possible in that race. That's not the point. And anyway, you just have to approach it with laughter and good times, and be willing to back off in the right places. Which, yeah, like you said, can be hard to do when you're racing, but you have to.
I love the way Chrigel always he's slightly underwhelmed with his descriptions. So he gets interviewed like on the start line, and they're like, "Wow, Chrigel, this is it's been 2 years. You've been waiting for this moment. You're about to go." And he's like, "Yeah, I've been training for 3 months, and yeah, I'm quite excited." he always gets in. He goes, "Yeah, it's just nice to be by the sea." Like he's just arrived on a bus on holiday. If we could get him like getting to the top of the Geisberg and lighting up a cigarette and just sitting down and going, "Yeah, it's a nice view." I think that would do the event wonders.
I think that's part of his psychology. It's so easy for him. It's so mellow. It just grinds the rest of us into the ground. Just like, Jesus, are you kidding me? He doesn't even get excited.
This year, he's not even bring a camper van. Yeah, he's just take it. He took it's like an electric car with a range of 100 miles last time.
He just does it because he's like the musician Jack White. That apparently every time he comes on stage, he wants everybody in a different position, and all of his instruments move slightly, so it just makes him so nothing's just planned out. He wants it all to be truly a live show, because he's that good. And I think Krigel's at that level. He's just that good where he can just do it however he wants. Speaking of developing as pilots, we can't all be Chrigel, but that was one of the topics we wanted to talk about. Just development, no matter where you are. What are the things you've seen over the years that works versus a hindrance versus, going the wrong way?
For me personally, learning when not to fly, and I think that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if you really love flying and you're on the hill and you're not feeling, like at the moment I'm just recovering from the flu and I wouldn't trust myself with a kite, let alone a paraglider. Some days you're just not meant to fly, and just learning what the right thing is for you is part of growing up as a pilot. When I was in Kisharda 4 years ago, I was so wasted after the first day, because you end up on a retrieve, totally unsuitable, kind of like a little retrieve, 2-wheel drive retrieve car, bouncing around over dirt tracks 5 a.m. until you get home at 7, and then you get 2 hours sleep, and then you sort of stumble up to launch, and I thought, what am I doing? I was trying to walk down to takeoff, because you sort of set up on the top and then walk down the hill a bit, and I just couldn't even keep my wing mushroomed up, and I thought, this is just ridiculous. And actually, just going back to the hotel and giving myself a day off, I felt really grown up. So I think just learning when to fly and when not to fly is a big one, obviously. Yeah, I don't know, just keeping asking questions, being curious, and just being patient with yourself. I think, like, I don't know if this is the same in the States, but in Britain, the pilots that tend to do really well are the ones where, Jockey Sanderson said this, he said you can't tell if they've had a good day or a bad day at the end of the day. They're just quite probably a bit reserved, bit just quiet, and don't get too excited about things. And so I think that sort of laissez-faire mindset can help you deal with the good days and the bad days. If you're kicking your helmet across the field when you land, then it's probably not great, is it? And the one thing that jumped out at me from interviewing Chrigel was the way he talks about managing his mindset when he's flying. So we're all aware that our brains are doing weird and wonderful things as we're flying. They're asking us questions about, well, are these carabiners going to snap at any minute, or am I flying like a complete donkey? Am I flying like a god? Those things going on in our brain can really unsettle our flying. And he just, in his quite sort of Swiss way, he has his 3 modes. He has his thermaling mode, where he just focuses on thermaling as efficient as he can, and when he's doing that and he feels like he's locked into the core, he goes into planning, looking around him, seeing what the clouds are doing. And then he goes into gliding, and he's gliding as efficiently as possible. And he asks himself, when he gets distracted, which mode am I in? And he brings himself back on track onto one of those modes. So, you know, why not apply that if you're a lower airtime pilot? You know, if you're on takeoff, I'm like, what am I doing? Okay, I'm assessing conditions. Just focus on that and really assess the conditions. Go through your checklist, treat it methodically. Taking off, just focus on taking off. Don't listen to someone trying to distract you. Focus on your pre-flight checks and getting in the air safely. Ridge storing, or hunting for the thermal. Just try and break it down into those sort of methodical ways of thinking, and that's exactly what pilots do when they train to fly planes. So why don't we do it ourselves?
I think that's really good advice. My mind just jumped kind of to meditation on there. I've been trying to do a lot more meditation the last few years, and I often use this app called Headspace. Oh yeah, and he's often going. He's a Brit, but he's often going. If you've wandered off, just recognize it and come on back, and I really like that in terms of just, I think we can often underestimate, gliding for sure, that, I'm on this nifty little lifty line and, I have something to eat, or I'll look around and suddenly you're not really focused in. And I like that idea of just coming back to it and making sure you're in one of those three modes like Chrigel does. I like that a lot.
When we were flying on the North-South Cup, me and Mark were flying with Mark Watson, flying with Kirsty Cameron and Russ, and me and Mark kind of pushed out a bit. We were all feeling smug, here we are, we're racing against Kirsty and Russ, and we're out front and we're doing it, and then a bit like Andy on Headspace, Russ comes over the radio and goes, "Oi, check in your rear view mirror, you've got a shit line, move to your left." And we're like, look back, and Russ is like 2,000 feet above us and off to the left. Like, oh, sorry, yeah, okay. So yeah. Like, felt a little bit scolded.
Not necessarily for competitions, but for just flying in general. You mentioned before we started recording, organizing yourself. What do you mean by that?
I don't know. Oh, yeah, okay. So,
come up with something quick. Hurry.
Quick. Okay, so in like 2011, 2012, I think about 4 years ago, I've been sort of just enjoying my flying, pootling about, blah, blah, blah. And I went up to Scotland to fly Glencoe with Jerome Malpois. He was taking pictures, and I was going to write a story about it. And there was Mike Kavanagh and Barney Woodhead, and all these Mike's in charge of OSA, but he's part of this sort of really good group of keen as mustard northern pilots who they do all the planning, and they really check the forecasts, and they plan out their routes, and they enter all their flights in the UK League. And I remember that evening that, I was absolutely amazed that they were entering the flights and checking for the next day. And I thought, wow, they're taking this really seriously. But I thought, well, how about if I tried a bit of that? Because I'd never really entered a flight in the league before. And I thought, okay, so I sort of had I thought, okay, well, why don't I try and fly as well as I possibly can in the UK? That'll be my sort of goal. And I thought, well, I'm only really flying for 3 or 4 hours. Why don't I keep landing up to 3 or 4 hours? And I listened to a podcast with Richard Carter, who had broken the UK records, done 250Ks, and he said, look, you need to be in the air for 6 hours, so you've got to learn what you need to do that is you need an XCP system, plug, XC shot. You need XCP, you need food, you need drink, you need to think these things through. And he was dead right. And I think having spent a bit more time preparing, getting a bit dweeby, looking at the forecasts the night before, it's lovely. You can sort of start fantasizing about the flight you're gonna take and set the goal, and it's added a whole level of enjoyment, and it's also made flying a bit more sort of mission focused. And we've had some amazing days out over the last 3 or 4 years, getting up at 5 a.m. and driving a couple of 100 miles and trying to fly back home. And yeah, so preparation is really important. If you just sit in the back of the car and you let your friends do all the work and you just check your Facebook on the drive to the hill and you get out and you go, oh, here I am, you get your wing out, you've kind of, you're already a long way behind the other pilots because you haven't built up a picture of what the day is going to be like. And so you've got no kind of expectations to check out what you're finding against based on the forecast you've had. And yeah, I think it's really important to be fully involved. And
I think that's why competitions can be so valuable, because they throw all that into it, don't they? That they give you a task and a goal for the day, and I have to give a lot of credit to one of my supporters in the X-Alps, Bruce Marks. My flying got so much better when he started really geeking out on X contests. So every spring we would go over to the Alps. And depending on where we were, which was always due to him because he pays a lot of attention to the weather and geeks out on that. So we'd end up in some place that was, good or perfect for flying for that day. And he'd have, all the biggest triangles mapped out that other people had done. So it's this incredible resource. Hats off to those guys for putting that together. But it's, I've very often recommended to other pilots to not just launch and fly around. Have a task, have some ideas for what you could do if the weather is perfect versus, and then of course things change as they always do when you're in the sky, but having option A, B, C, D, E, and, making every flight a training flight, make it view it as an opportunity to get better, even a sledder.
And psychologically as well, if you're setting your goal 20Ks, 50Ks, whatever it is, and you've got your GPS telling you a distance to that point, then psychologically, I think that's better than just going over the back and seeing how far you can go and being, it gives you something to aim for, which is always good.
Hugh, a question I ask a lot of my guests that people tend to like. If you could rewind the clock to your 50-hour self, so in that first or second year, do you wish you would have gotten advice, or did you get advice that you wish you would have heeded?
I've been very lucky, touch wood. I've never had any accidents. I've had a really privileged life in flying. I competed when I wanted to compete. I got through that safely, and I'm really enjoying my flying still now, 23, 24 years on. Is it really that long? Bloody hell. No, I just take it steady, really, I guess. I was very, very keen to do well early on. And, but, back when you're 15, 16, 17, you don't really have much fear, do you? Mm. So, yeah, I think I was probably quite lucky to get through without any scrapes. No, I can't really. What would you say?
Yeah, slow. Take it slower. I was incredibly aggressive when I got into it. I guess that's just my personality, and I think looking back, I was lucky that I surrounded myself with really good mentors and pilots, guys like Nate Scales and Nick Reese, and they seemed to be constantly going, "Hey, man." Ratchet it back. And I think luckily I got through that kind of, whatever we want to call it, intermediate syndrome. But I probably could have gotten through a little more elegantly or just more, appreciated, because knock on wood, I've never had an injury either. Well, small little thing on that Rockies Traverse where I busted my lip, but, nothing dramatic at all. And, I think that could have gone, but I've certainly had some close calls that were way too close, and so I guess that would be it. That just to take your time. It's a sport that can be enjoyed for your whole life. There's no rush.
Yeah. I think you're right. Having good mentors around you as well. It's quite an individualistic sport, but having good people around you. Jockey Sanderson was very kind and very supportive of me when I was flying in competitions, and just having people who kind of look out for you and are encouraging, but tell you not to fly a wing that you don't feel 100% comfortable on, and just I think that helps temper your kind of desire to take on more than you probably should. And I always come back to this idea that you're kind of building a model of what's happening all the time, and the best way to do that is to not be stressed and to be able to just take information in and just process it. And it's a long game.
That is the long game. On that very fine note, what I'd love to end us on, if you don't mind, is you may have heard this in some of the shows, but I do this Proust questionnaire, James Lipton's, and if you're not familiar with it, all the best. You don't have to answer these in one-word things, but we'll take you through it. Answer however you like. What is your favorite word and least favorite word?
Favorite word, epic, probably.
Ow, gosh. That's
Least favorite word. Oh, I don't know. I'm just feeling so full of flu. I'm just looking at the smelly socks. Maybe smelly socks. So that's 2 words. God, I don't know. My head is like, it's been filled with marshmallows. I've got no idea what I'm talking about. So
you know what? That's it must be going around. There's plenty of people here battling the flu as well. But you took epic right out of my. I say epic way too much. I'm really trying to cut that down. But that is a great.
I said it
word.
before anyone else.
You own that one, do you? Okay. What turns you on and what turns you off? And that obviously can be sexual, but it doesn't have to be.
My partner.
Excellent. Excellent. That's good.
Just peace of mind. Feeling relaxed and having peace of mind is fantastic, isn't it? And just those moments can just be a few seconds, or they can last several hours. But I think we could all do with more peace of mind. What was the other one? What turns me off?
Yeah.
Oh, people who are a bit loud, and it's very English, isn't it? People who are a bit loud. Oh God.
Hey, you're talking to an American. I got nothing on you guys.
I don't know. Yeah, just rudeness, probably. Rudeness and abrasiveness. No, it's nothing wrong with lots of charisma, but not too keen on rudeness.
What sound or noise do you love and not love?
I quite like silence, actually. You know, when you're in the mountains and it's just everything goes quiet. I haven't had that for a while. It's not so much about the sound; it's your ability to hear them. So sometimes, first thing in the morning, if I just go for a walk around the park and I can stop my mind from, and you just hear the birds singing. That's lovely. Sounds that I don't love. Arguments. Yeah. Rash voices. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all only a state of mind. Sometimes you can handle everything and sometimes you just can't.
Yeah, sure, of course. What is your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
Always reliable. And what profession other than your own would you like to...
Having said that, the word bastard said properly. Like in the north of England, they say bastard. They know how to say bastard. In the south, we don't. We all say bastard. It's just it's wrong. It's just it's got to be said like bastard. So I spent a few years and I'd like to think I could pretend how to say bastard. I'm wrong. I know I'm a posh English middle-aged twat, but we can all pretend, can't we?
Did John Cleese say it correctly? I'm thinking of the Faulty Towers.
He never said bastard, actually. He said fuck quite a lot, but
yeah.
No, I don't think he. No.
Let's see. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Interesting. I'd like to be a helicopter pilot. I think that'd be quite fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Why something different just popped into my head. I'm kind of, yeah, I enjoy the job I do, but I can't say it's particularly easy. I've only been doing it a few months in the new role I'm in, and it's definitely challenging at times. So yeah, just to abandon that and go and fly a helicopter for a bit would be quite fun.
One of the things that I found really incredible up in Alaska when I was doing the traverse with Dave, the Cineflex heli pilot, they came in, I think 8 of the days to film when we, can we have something that we thought was going to be big happening, like flying past Denali. These guys would come out from Homer, and the heli pilot was just, they had never filmed, they do a lot of Cineflex filming up in Alaska, but they'd never filmed paragliding. And when they started seeing, us using thermals and gliding from one ridgetop to another, that kind of thing, he was just totally blown away. And he got really curious. And so when we'd be hiking up to a launch, he'd often jump out of the heli and come with us, and was just asking all kinds of questions. And we got to see it, what it really means to be a paraglider and then fly something mechanical. When Paul Guschelbauer, he was up there supporting us. He bought a Super Cub this winter from my buddy Ken, who was the kind of our support pilot up on that trip. And I always regarded Ken as the best Super Cub pilot in Alaska. I mean, he is the guy that the whole state calls when somebody goes down, which happens a lot, to go get the wreckage and fly it home, wrap it up. Like when a bear eats a plane, he's the guy that wraps it up with duct tape and flies it home or whatever. I mean, he's super competent. He's been flying Super Cubs and small aircraft forever. And Paul went up, this spring and, very quickly racked up over a couple hundred hours flying the film crew around. And, it was a great opportunity for him, but he came in very green. He'd flown a little bit in Austria, which is just not even relevant to flying in Alaska. And then, he gets this plane, and by the end of the season, and I don't know how serious Ken was, but Ken was saying that he was better than anybody he'd ever seen flying a Super Cub, because he and another guy would be flying out two separate airplanes, and Paul would be at 14 grand, and the other guy would just be motoring along like they always do right down the middle of the valley at 4 grand, wondering how Paul got up there. And
right,
it's just really amazing that these guys, when they're flying with engines, they're not thinking so much about updrafts and currents and convergence and all these things that are so natural to us. And so he really got good really fast. It was pretty incredible.
In the first 2 or 3 Red Bull X-Alps, I jumped in with the helicopter. I just said, I really need to report on this from the air. Get me in that helicopter. Really important to me. Really, you want colour? Get me in a helicopter.
Right.
And maybe, some of the days, Alex Hoffer and Chrigel Maurer were pushing really hard into like a 40, 50k an hour wind, and the helicopter be struggling to climb over the peaks. And I was thinking, my God, does give you a perspective on the kind of conditions they're flying in.
Yeah.
It's
when
they're
Will,
not very big helicopters, are they?
No, they're not.
They're quite small.
No, exactly. When Will Gadd and I were doing the rocket service, the very first day, we'd taken off, and the heli was inbound. They weren't there yet. The filming helicopters coming in from Vancouver, and they arrived just as we got to Mount Robson, which is the highest mountain in the Canadian Rockies, and it was just on. There was no wind. It was cranking, strong thermals, just the most epic, beautiful day. Actually, the whole trip, it got worse from there on out. But that day, he had just loaded up on fuel, and it was hysterical out climbing and out flying an A-Star helicopter and a paraglider. He couldn't understand how we were getting up so fast. So we dial up and then come out of the thermal and do acro and come back down to him so he could film us. And then we dial back up, and he was just slowly circling the mountain, trying to get up to where we were at, 12,000 feet. It wasn't even that high, but it was hysterical. I just thought, Will, we're out flying a helicopter. This is awesome.
That's slightly showing off, though, isn't it, Gavin?
Well, I mean, don't we have to do that sometimes? Yes, exactly. Yeah. Look at us. Look what we can do. Okay, final one here. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I don't think I've ever. I mean, no, I have listened to lots of your podcasts, but I've never got to this question. Really?
Well, okay,
Um,
I'm gonna before you even answer, I'm just gonna say Will Gadd's was the best, so you've got to beat him.
Right.
Go.
Right, okay. I'm not into God at the moment. My brothers are born again Christian. I'm gay. I'm getting married. He's not coming to my marriage. I'm anti-God. I'm anti-Christians. I'm sorry. That's it. Interview over.
That's a great answer. I love it. I love it. Oh man, you and I have got together one of these days, and we can talk atheism and Trump and Brexit and have a grand old time. But this is probably not the right forum. Excellent, Hugh. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Good luck with your. When you get married?
In May the 27th. So that's probably be the best day of the year. But there you go.
Oh, excellent. Well, I'll mark that on my calendar. Congratulations. That's awesome. And I hope to come over and join you guys for the North-South Cup. And if not that, then I hope Red Bull will have you back to cover the race. And so you can see my goofy grin at the top of the iceberg. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you at Cloudbase one of these days. Happy New Year, buddy.
Pleasure. Yeah, you too, Gavin. Nice to chat to you.
Underneath the sea, waving affections. You were out of my league.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Wow, what a great talk. I'm just consistently blown away with the advice and the tactics and some of the stuff, the strategies that we're getting from all these amazing people and mentors to me and hopefully mentors to you. As always, all we ask for is $1 a show. As I said at the top of the show, there's some new ways to support us. You'll find those links on the cloudbasemayhem.com. One of the things, too, that I get a lot of is requests for people to get on the show. I promise that I've got all those lined up. We've got a whole bunch of shows already in the bag behind us and in forward of us. When I go to Europe for the X-Alps, I'm going to be gone for like 6 weeks, but we're going to keep putting these out every other Wednesday. We've got some great people coming down the line, so stick with us. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you on the next episode. Cheers.
At a distance that I didn't wanna see.